Right, on the bench today we have a Penn 525 Mag 3. There's nothing incredibly complicated about any of these reels. It's just a question of, if you're not taking one apart before, is being careful to watch what order you take it to bits in. Drop all the parts and screws and such into a container, that way you don't lose them. With the handle nut, handle comes off, little washer goes underneath the handle. With the star drag, and the packet goes underneath. Take note of the order. I wasn't helping, load of line trapped in there. This explains why it was running slowly. That's the clicker for the star drag. Pack of washers to set the amount of drag. And there we go. That was the fault with the reel. I'm told was very tight to turn. Hold out the line that's got underneath the star drag wrapped around the shaft. There you go. That has probably solved all this reel's problems, but right, now we have the anti-reverse bearing in there. Now turn the reel over, slight tap. Do keep these bits together with its inner. The inner comes out, the little needle rollers fall out. Absolute pain putting it all back together. It's not necessary. Right, now these screws go right through the reel into here. So what you've got is two long screws, which go into here on either side. And the rear screws, which I've already taken out, will actually slide off if you lift the reverse spool release lever up. And you'll find under here is a tiny little screw there, which is there for assembly purposes. Number of times I've seen these broken because people take out the two screws here and the two on the back and then prise it apart because they don't realise the odd little screw that's stuck away in here. There. Now this unit will come straight off. We have a bush in here, what we call an eccentric spring, which is basically what causes this to catch under spring tension rather than flop about. If that's all clean and tidy, that is removed by removing this screw here. The spring goes in, the hole goes in there. If that's all clean and tidy, there's no point in dismantling it. Squirt a bit of grease around it, job done. On this end we have the main gear with the drag pack. Two springs which sit on the post there. Pinion gear and its carrier, and the slider which moves the pinion gear up and down in and out of mesh. That is literally it on that side. Again, unless the reel's very old and well worn, there's no point in removing all this lot. There's nothing in there, it's only a retaining plate to hold that shaft in place. Put a bit of grease, squirt a bit of grease on, job done. This end, again, same principle. It's 4 screws, two long ones that go where these bars here are fitted, go straight through, If these are tight to undo, avoid using pliers on these bars. They're very soft anodised aluminium. Chews them up something shocking if you try using pliers. If you need to grip them, plastic pliers, or if you must use pliers, bit of cloth, bit of leather or something in the jaw of the plier to protect the material. I have seen them where been over tightened or a bit of corrosion has got between the steel screw and the aluminium bar. They don't come out. That end comes off. There's your magnet assembly. Make sure everything's free moving and free turning. Common fault we get with these is when the magnets are full on, as in that position, you get a chink 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 rattle with that, and it's hitting the spool. And what actually happens is that is very precise and it taps against the end of the spool, and you often see like a shiny line on the spool in here. It's purely not a problem. All you've got to do is just get that, just tweak it back into place, solves that problem completely. I've seen so many of these reels suffer from that brand new out of the box. Spool comes out, there's bearings in the spool there. So that spool's running lovely and freely. A little bit of spray grease into each of those before you reassemble it. That's all it needs. These rollers totally rotate, so if you get one which right a lot of wear on the actual face of that roller, before you put it back together, just rotate it 180 degrees so the nice shiny side from underneath is what's showing. That is literally all there is to it. Should give all the components a clean, a little bit of grease, put them back together. Basically there's nothing wrong with this reel other than the fact that it was very stiff to turn due to all that line that got trapped under the star dragon around the shaft. But as with any of the reels I sell used, we always strip them, clean them, check them over, find out why they're not working. And there's no point just fixing the fault. Let's fully service a reel when it's apart. We should clean it all up and come back and do the reassembly. Right, all cleaned up and ready to put back together. Start with this side. A little bit of spray lubricant. Slider goes in there. Now with these reels, unlike the Warfare, it makes no real difference which way up this carrier goes because there's no shoulders or smooth edges on it. So that goes in the actual channel in the pinion gear, in the gap there, goes over the two posts, pushes into the bearing. Bearing in there, which that's a nice close fit in. Next, the washer with the square off sides of the rounded ends goes on top of there. Just one way. Small carbon washer fits on top of that. Main gear goes on top of that. Make sure it's all sat down nicely so it lines up with the pinion gear. Teeth should come totally in line at the top there. Then your carbon washers go in, one of those, then a flat washer, and a carbon washer, and a flat washer, a carbon washer, and the final flat washer with a plain washer on top of that. I've taken reels apart where people have carefully polished, cleaned and totally removed any traces of lubricant from the drag washers and the drag pack. You need a tiny smear of lubricant on these steel washers. The drag is designed to slip smoothly when released. When you get it completely and utterly dry, you find the drag is going in a kind of a jerky movement. Right. Two springs goes on the posts here and here. Little bit of lubricant on the gears. Nothing wrong with Vaseline. Don't get sucked into buying these expensive specialist reel greases. All they are is a basic grease that's been packaged with the fancy instructions and a fishing tax implied to them. It's like this rocket fuel you buy for reels. All it is a very light oil. Sewing machine oil works just as well. Cover goes on. Make sure it sits down. Little movement on the spool release so that engages with the sliding bracket inside. Then that tiny screw that we previously took out from here goes in. Its only purpose in life is to hold the whole thing together whilst you're assembling the reel. Otherwise the top cover keeps coming up on the springs and popping about. That just holds everything together. Now this band, if you move the spool release button to halfway, that band will go easily under there without bending it, without forcing it. Two longest of the case screws goes into here. Do be careful not to cross thread screws on reels. Taking this reel apart, I found one of the screws was cross threaded on here. Absolute devil of a job getting it out without doing any damage. And that one down. And there's two screws going into here. Are these little ones. This is why that when you open Penn reels there's very rarely any dirt or debris, sand or such inside them, because they're so very well sealed up. Unlike most Abu reels, when you open them up, they're usually full of all sorts of rubbish. That tightened up. Spray lubricant. Right, main shaft off. Don't put grease on this, only makes it stick. Then goes in. Obviously the long side of the shaft goes in towards the handle, so there. Take the end plate, obviously the Penn logo lines up, okay, and rotate it so it sits over the screws. Take this until it gets the correct alignment. Again, the two long screws to either side to go into the rubbing bars. Don't need to over tighten these, you're not trying to do heavy engineering, just spin them in, just nip them up so they don't come out again. No need to Loctite or thread lock any of these. Nothing's coming apart. That's that part. Now, I always find it easiest, take the collar, there's flats on the inside of this collar, there's flats on the shaft, take that so it drops all the way in. Drag always goes open end down, closed end to the top. That slides in. You then got two washers. Now these washers are concave or convex depending which way up you look at them. Put them so the convex, that's the outward dome sides, are outwards. This goes on next. This is the little clicker mechanism. Star drag goes on. If star drag doesn't go on easily, you've got it cross threaded. It should go on literally that easily. Don't cross thread these, cause yourself no end of problems. Just get down to hear it clicking on the clicker. Washer there goes there. Handle goes on top of that. Handle nut goes on there. Again, very easy to cross thread these, because what you have is a shaft with squared off flats on it. It tends to force itself to cross thread half the time. If it doesn't go on with your fingers just like that, you've got it cross threaded. Cross thread them tend to damage the shaft rather than the nut, which becomes quite an expensive mistake. Handle keeper nut goes in. Don't over tighten this, you break the nut keeper, it's only plastic. Magnet's full off. Magnet's full on. Should always have a little bit of end float. Just back that off. Gauge the spool, drag's solid. Drags on down and off, drag on. There's no winding, nice and free like it should do without all that line and rubbish that was wrapped around underneath it. Check the end float once it's run in a little bit. Magnet's full on, even I couldn't bird's nest that. Job done. Final thing I tend to like to do is when I finish the reel, get a little bit of silicone spray, a PTFE spray. Microfiber cloth. This sort of revitalises the plastic a little bit, puts a little bit of shine on it, puts a little bit of protection on it, makes the reel look nice and tidy and neat and cared for. Just brings the decals up nice and clean, always makes the reel look better. There you go, all done.